Like to declare the council meeting open. I would like to also remind everybody that in accordance with council's code of meeting practice, other than the public forum section, this meeting is being live streamed. The prayer of council and will be read by the acting Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Tim Moore.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Affirmation of council. We affirm our hope and dedication to the good government of our city and the well-being of all of Liverpool's residents, no matter their race or creed. Tonight we affirm and hope for sound decision-making by council, which will improve the quality of life in our city. We express our expectations and best wishes for Australia, our nation's future, the Mayor, councillors and staff of council, and all those associated with good government in Liverpool. Prayer of council. For the God of our faith, we who are gathered at Liverpool City Council pray for the good government of our city. We pray for the well-being of all Liverpool's residents, no matter their race, gender or creed. Tonight we pray for sound decision-making by council, which can improve the quality of life in our city. We pray for Australia, our nation's future, for the Mayor, councillors and staff of council and all those associated with good government in Liverpool. Amen.
Thank you. Do we have any apologies? Okay. Any condolences? Confirmation of minutes of the 27th of May and the 9th of June.
Yes, move that way. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Shelton has joined us. Welcome. Seconded.
Councillor.
Councillor
Seconded, Madam Mayor.
I think Councillor did beat you to it.
Oh, good.
Thank you. I'll put it. Those in favour, those against, declare it carried. The next item is our public forum, and as you know, there's no verbal presentations, but written submissions have been sent to all councillors. One from Robert Pinoza on EGRO 05, one from John Wynne on EGRO 04, one from James Stanton Cook on NOM 03, and they've been emailed to councillors as far as I'm aware. The next item on the agenda is, oh, these have all been done differently to usual. This is going to be fun. Yeah. Somebody Okay, the next first item on the agenda is CEO 01.
Before you go on to that, Madam Mayor, conflicts of interest.
Oh, sorry, I apologise. You are correct, Councillor Shelton. Sorry. Any conflicts of interest?
Yes, I have one. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yes. What is it,
Madam
Councillor?
Mayor, in relation to item NOM 03, it just happens that I have shares in the company referred to there. Not much. Pecuniary, yes. Significant, hardly. But I will leave the room in any event, as I think I'm supposed to.
Okay, then. That's your decision, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other declarations of interest? Thank you. The first item is CEO 01 and the recommendations on page 57.
And happy to move that way, Madam Mayor.
Happy to second it. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, councillors. My sheet that I usually have has the page numbers and they don't, so I might be a bit slower tonight. I apologise. Oh, stop that. The page has a mind of its own. All right, thank you. Any opposition? None. I'll put it those in favour, those against, declare it carried. The next item is CEO 02, which is
page 59.2, Madam Mayor, if that helps you.
Thank you. The recommendations on page 60.
Move that way.
Thank you, Councillor Haggerty. Seconded, Councillor Caliander.
Can I ask a question, Mayor, please?
Certainly, Councillor.
To the relevant officer, I note that we're on a time frame here because obviously we need to get this on exhibition ASAP to be able to adopt it for when we need to. What happens if there's some major changes in the next meeting? Does that cause an issue when it comes off exhibition?
Would you like me to answer that question, Madam Mayor?
Yes, certainly. Go ahead.
Thank you. Councillor, it will present us with an issue if we aren't able to meet the time frames, because we do need to have a delivery plan and operational plan adopted by that date. So as you pointed out, we are on a fast track now to get this on exhibition ASAP. I think we're working towards getting it on exhibition before the end of this week. There's a 28-day exhibition period, and then a small amount of time to pull together responses received from submissions. I guess all I can say is that we will do all that has to be done to pull together any changes that may arise from submissions made during that exhibition period to meet that time frame. I think we've got 2 or 3 days at the end of the exhibition in order to pull that together and then present the plan back to council for adoption. So, you know, it would depend on the scale of any such changes, but all I can say is we'd be committed to working any changes in if they arise.
Thanks for that. I mean, at the end of the day, yes, will I be supporting personally this to go on exhibition? Yes, not for any other reason, but that we've got no choice but to put this on exhibition.
Thank you, Councillor.
I have some questions, Madam Mayor.
Yes, certainly, Councillor Rhodes.
The first question I've got is that to help in that and assist that, I already have a request for a alteration. It's in regard to S2.02 in the attachment book, page 241, which is the development and improvement of strategies, policy and management of stormwater programs for the management of stormwater. In the first point, the request is if we could add after Georges River, Wattle Grove Lake and Anzac Creek, continuing on to Kemps Creek.
Councillor, you would have to move that as a formal amendment to the document.
Then I move that as a formal motion.
I've just asked the acting CEO, is that shouldn't be any difficulty for the document though, should it?
Madam Mayor, not that I can see. I guess the other option is, Councillor Rhodes, if you would like to make that change through the exhibition period, we could look at accommodating it that way. But if it's recorded here as part of any resolution, that is also workable for us.
All right, so I do move that as a formal motion.
Okay, so you move the recommendation plus a point 4, which is those physical locations be included on page 241.
That's it, which is to include Wattle Grove Lake and Anzac Creek after Georges River. Wattle Grove Lake
No.
and Anzac Creek. And then it continues on.
Thank you. We have a seconder for that?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll ask the mover and the seconder, are they happy to have that adopted into their motion?
Yes, I am.
Haggerty and Caliander I'm talking to. Sorry, Councillor.
Yeah, look, for the sake of getting this out, you know, we've had ample opportunity at briefings and previous council meetings to raise any amendments. I'd prefer that it would have been raised there, but it's a minor amendment and happy to accept it.
Thank you. Councillor Caliander, are you okay with that too?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right then. Thank you. It won't have to put it up as an amendment, Councillor.
Okay, Madam Mayor, just one further question, if you would allow me.
Mm-hmm.
In the delivery program, I noticed that the Bellboard, well, first question is, did the Bellbird restaurant recently change its name?
Through the Mayor, not to my knowledge.
All right, then my question is irrelevant.
Okay, good. Is there any opposition? I'll put it. Those in favour, those against, declare it carried. The next item's on page 67 and it's EGRO 02.
I have questions again, Madam Mayor.
Certainly, Councillor.
I'm happy to move it as it is. My questions aren't.
Yes, certainly. Okay, so you're moving, and what is your question, Councillor Rhodes?
My questions are that after the contribution figure agreed with Logos, I'm presuming that there will be a significant figure remaining as a cost to council. Are there any other sites available for future developments in that area that will have benefit of the intersection upgrade that will also be asked to contribute to the cost of the intersection upgrade?
Through the Mayor, we have just identified these sites as the sites to contribute to this intersection upgrade, because the intersection upgrade is really about accommodating heavy vehicles or very heavy vehicles that are associated with the land uses on these sites. There may be some shortfall in funds, but we're reasonably confident also that the funds collected across these 6 sites will, go very close to covering the cost of the intersection upgrade. And for that reason, we haven't been focused on identifying other sites. It may be difficult to include other sites because it may be difficult to establish the linkage between higher volumes of heavy truck usage at their approved uses and the upgrade of this intersection. But moreover, we're comfortable that we're able to recoup, the right amount or close to the right amount of funds for these works.
Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't get in quick enough. I had my button on mute, but I was going to request that this be moved into confidential. I've got some questions that have sort of legal implications, and I don't want to sort of discuss them in open council.
Okay.
Happy to agree with that.
Okay. Well, we've got to move in a second, and we'll add that to the confidential. I've just put a little asterisk there. Thank you. The next item is EGRO 02, and it's on page 75.
Happy to receive and note that report.
Mayor, I'm not trying to speak out of turn here, but I think someone's trying to alert you to a Merrill minute.
Oh, yes, thank you. It wasn't on my sheet. I apologise. I'll do this and then I'll do the Merrill minute.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to move it, Councillor Rhodes, and seconder.
Happy to
Madam Mayor, did Councillor Rhodes say she was receiving and noting the report, or did she say 1, 2, 3 and 4?
She said this, note the report.
1, 2, 3 and 4. Thank you.
Oh, in that case, I second then. Fine.
Councillor,
Thank you.
beat you to it, I'm afraid, Councillor Shelton.
No worries.
Okay, is there any opposition? I'll put it, those in favour, those against, declare it carried. Okay, well, if we don't mind for the moment, I'll just go back to the Merrill minute, which is going to be up. It is. Apologise. What I printed out for my running sheet tonight is different to what I usually get, and anyway, it's my fault. I should have done my homework. Okay, Merrill minute. Liverpool's one of the fastest growing local government areas in Australia, and place where women and girls should feel safe, including and able to reach their full potential. Women of all ages, abilities, identities and social and cultural backgrounds should be able to fully and freely participate and enjoy our city's social, economic and cultural life. This benefits everybody in our city. The Greater Sydney Women's Safety Charter was launched on International Women's Day this year, and it was made up of government agencies, businesses, peak groups and not-for-profit organisations who work together to improve the safety of women and girls in Greater Sydney. In December last year, the Greater Sydney Commission and Transport for New South Wales hosted a forum for the City of People and on women and safety in the city. This charter was an outcome of this event. More than 70 organisations came together to make this possible. Groups that joined the charter improved the safety of the women and girls through policies and practices, and also service planning and delivery and communication with stakeholders and the community. They helped to promote equity and create cities that are welcoming, open and accessible to everybody. The Charter has 3 foundation principles: a commitment to culture of gender equality, a commitment to listen, share and reflect, and a commitment to collective action and continuous improvement. My motion is that Council endorse becoming a signatory to the Greater Western Sydney Women's Safety Charter. I move that way.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, certainly.
can I request that we add something just to let local stakeholder groups know that we have signed up to this and kind of encourage them to sort of get on board or take up some of the actions and things like that?
Yeah, we can do that, Councillor, without actually putting that in the motion. I think that's we would do that as a matter of course, I believe.
Okay, no worries.
Okay.
Question, Mayor.
Yes, certainly.
Totally supportive of what you've put forward. Now, commitment. What are we actually doing besides committing? Are we actually putting things into place at council?
At the moment, no. It's basically we're agreeing to the 3 principles, and if there's any, well, obviously if there's any financial implications, that will be brought back to council without a problem in the world.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I'll move that way. Any opposition? Move. Thank you. The next item is on page 94. Jumping all over the place.
Yeah, move the recommendation, Madam Mayor. Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Hadid. Seconder?
Seconded, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Any opposition? I'll put it. Those in favour, those against, declare it carried. Next item is on page 100 and it's EGRO 04.
Happy to move that as per the book, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Rhodes.
Seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Hull. Any opposition? I'll put it. Those in favour, those against, declare it carried. The next item is EGRO 05 on 110.
10.7.
EGRO 05 on page 110.
Move that way.
Happy to second it.
Thank you, Councillor Haggerty. Seconded, Councillor Hull. Any opposition? None. I'll put it. Those in favour, those against, declare it carried. The next item is EGRO 06 on page 118.
Question through you, Mayor, please.
Yep, certainly.
And I suppose this is to my fellow councillors, which councillors actually are able to sit on this?
There is a requirement in the documentation.
Yeah, so before I nominate people, well, I'm happy to nominate, but obviously there's people that can't sit on it, me being one.
Mm-hmm.
So are there councillors that are not able to sit on this?
Well, real estate agents and developers are obviously not allowed. But also, I'm just looking at the report. There was something in the report that talked about that.
Perhaps I can assist, Madam Mayor. There is in the report, it notes that there's a requirement for some expertise, but that is only for one of the panel members or one of the council's representatives. And I think the panel secretariat apply a fairly broad definition of that, but it does refer to expertise in the area of planning, architecture, heritage, environment, urban design, land economics, transport, etc. That's noted at point 5 on page 120.
Thank you.
All right, well, I'm happy to move a motion.
Yep.
So receive and note the report.
Yep.
Nominate, and I'll just get the ball rolling, Councillor Rhodes as an alternate. And then if there's anybody else that wants to nominate, put your hand up now.
Put your electronic hand up.
I accept the nomination, Madam Mayor. I have experience on the panel before. I'm a land and engineering survey draftsperson with town planning components included in that qualification. I was previously employed at Bankstown Council Department of Town Planning as a land engineering and survey draftsperson.
Thank you. We got a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second it, Councillor Hadi.
Thank you, Councillor Did.
Is there anyone, sorry, Mayor, before you put it, is there anyone else that wants to nominate?
I think silence is the nomination, Councillor. So the additional person is Councillor Rhodes. Councillor Rhodes accepted the nomination, so there'll be 3 reserves. Okay, is there any opposition to this nomination?
No.
I'll put it, those in favour, those against, declare it carried. The next item's on page 131 and it's COM 01.
And I have some questions about this, Madam Mayor, and
Certainly.
thinking the answer is a possible motion. The first question is in regards, are we allowed to say, yes, we are, obviously, because they're in the agenda. The Bill Cruz application, what is the number of households in 2168 area? Do we have any idea?
Dr. Jackson, are you able to answer that question?
I know there's about 22,000 people.
Yeah.
You want to divide that by 3.2 or something?
Through the CEO, I would have to take that on notice.
Okay. It's just that I thought, well, a survey over 600 households compared to the number of households, I question the relevant number of participants to deliver any substantial useful information. The other question I have about that, what job-ready qualifications do the 12 participants receive?
Through the CEO, as part of this CHATRA, the Centre for Health Equity Training, Research and Evaluation are one of a number of partners who are proposing this project. The 600 households is seen to give a representative sample, a valid sample, which would be, in statistical terms. In terms of the actual qualifications, obviously, this is seen as a pathway to further training and employment. And as such, then, the training course, the survey that the applicants and the participants would receive would be verified by CHATRA and would be seen as useful documentation in terms of potential other employers and trying to demonstrate that people were on that particular pathway.
All right, thank you very much for that answer. My other concern was about the schools and what they are proposing to do with their different proposals, but they all involve, bringing people into the school. And I just wondered if that is a recommendation council should be making in consideration of COVID. And the motion that I would like councillors to consider, considering COVID and the costs that COVID is going to be to council, the motion would be if council is for council to postpone all future grants and relocate all funds currently sitting in the grants funding back into general revenue to help offset the expected 50 million COVID cost to council in the 2019 postpone and redirect all funds to the general revenue.
I'd like to foreshadow a motion.
Thank you, Councillor. So
Yeah.
the motion reads, Council postpone community funding grants and to have that money diverted to revenue to
cover the costs, the 50 million anticipated cost, COVID costs.
Thank you. Okay. Do you have a seconder for your motion, Councillor? I'm going to say that
Happy to
motion.
second it. Sorry, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Hall has seconded. Thank you. You wish to speak to your motion, Councillor Rhodes?
Yes, Madam Mayor, it's just that, these have been before council before, and it's just that we're in a situation which is completely unexpected, and is going to be a considerable cost to council because of the COVID pandemic. And these particular grants could be brought back to council at a time that we're in more of a position that we haven't already got, you know, a $50 million cost to council because of the COVID implications. I just thought it was worth considering. So that's basically it. It's pure and simple, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. We've got someone who wishes to speak against the motion.
I'll speak against it. Just to say that it's a small amount of money. It'll stimulate the economy. I think in one of them is a single-use water bottle pourer that'll stimulate the water bottle tap industry. You don't restrict spending. You continue spending during a downturn. By restricting spending, you take money out of the economy. You don't want to do that. These are relatively small amounts of money, and they actually have very, very good benefits for the community. I went down and saw the last one that Malik Fad did. I think it was last year. They had a nice little garden with lots of flourishing vegetables. These are really good. They give young kids a good leg up. In relation to the Bill Cruz one, based on my little knowledge of statistics, if you're surveying 600 people out of from I think what we said was about 20,000, that's a pretty good margin of error. So you're going to get very accurate results there. We need, as we saw with the other grants last couple of weeks ago, we need to be, as council, we need to be injecting money into the economy, not pulling it out.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other speakers for the motion? Councillor Hull, did you wish to speak?
I just wanted to ask a question.
Yes.
Councillor Haggerty alluded to the fact that Malik Fard Islamic School received the grant last year, or I think last year. Don't we have a limit on the policy? In other words, if they've received that grant in the previous year, they can't get a grant in the following year?
I'll ask the staff. Councillor.
Dr. Jackson, can you?
Through the CEO, it would depend on which grant, but certainly we can check that and confirm one way or the other. Given that there are different grant streams, I would assume that that is a valid application.
Madam Mayor, if that's the case, I would like to see everyone deferring this item till we get the answer, because it's not right, to approve it and approve the application for the school's request and later on say, well, look, sorry, we got it wrong. So just defer the item for next meeting and see how it goes.
Well, why don't we put it to the end of the agenda, and in the meantime, someone can go off and check.
I don't mind that.
Madam Mayor.
You're on mute, Madam Mayor.
Sorry. Through the Mayor.
The Mayor's muted.
I'm unmuted now, sorry. Councillor Haggerty, was that you that made a comment just then?
No, Madam Mayor, it was me.
No, there was a male voice before.
Madam Mayor, this Councillor Haggerty. I said the school in request had a fund last year, and this year not allow. I don't believe we should approve the motion now and later on just regret what we've done. So Councillor Haggerty had another opinion. Is just leave it for the end of the meeting and send someone to check if this is correct or not.
I'm happy to move that agenda item, but I'm going to deal with the formality of the motion that's before us first.
All right, there was a second point to that I didn't tell you about.
Yes, Councillor.
Which was point 2, if you like, defer consideration of current grants applications until such time as COVID-19 no longer has a financial cost impact on the budget of council.
Okay, thank you. So, All right. Any other speakers for or against this motion? Now I need the chart so we can actually chart the answers. This is going to be a bit difficult, I think. George, can you put yes? Thank you.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, can I just clarify? Is there a foreshadowed motion on the book?
There is a foreshadowed motion on the floor, but it's there until the councillor withdraws it and maybe puts a deferral to the end of the meeting instead. We don't know what the foreshadowed motion is as yet, Councillor Caliander. So we will wait and see.
Happy to move my motion into the
Councillor, we're taking the vote. I'm voting against your motion. Councillor Ayard?
Well, can I include in my motion, Madam Mayor, that this motion is considered in the confidential section of the council meeting?
Mm-hmm.
As a third.
On what grounds, Councillor? Because to have it in a confidential section, it has to have some legal issue or some private matters that relate to personal matters or financial matters that are private and not commercial in confidence.
I thought you'd already chosen to move it into the confidential section.
No, we're just deferring it to the end of the meeting on the agenda.
Oh, so it's not going to be...
That may actually not happen because we have a formal motion before us. Then we have a foreshadowed motion, which I have to deal with, which I haven't heard yet. So that people are jumping the gun a little. So please be a bit more focused.
Well, what I said.
Excuse me, Councillor Hadid, I know your sentiments. We're just going to deal with this motion as put by Councillor Rhodes and seconded by Councillor Hall. Postpone all future community funding grants and redirect the funds to general reserve to cover the 50 million COVID-19 costs, defer considerations of grants until such time as the cost impact of the council regarding to the virus. I'm voting against the motion. Councillor Ayard.
Madam Mayor, apologies. What's the other motion?
We haven't got it yet. It's foreshadowed.
Oh, so there's only that one?
That's the moment, yep.
I'm going to vote against.
Okay, next. I've lost my sheet again. It's gone. Please bring back the voting sheet. Thank you. So against, Ayard. Councillor Balut.
Against, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Chitty. Councillor Chitty.
Where are you?
Move on. Councillor Did.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Haggerty.
Against.
Councillor Hall voted, he seconded the motion. Councillor Caliander.
Absolutely against, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Canib.
Against.
Councillor Rhodes moved the motion, so she's for. Councillor Shelton.
Against. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I declare the motion lost. The foreshadowed motion now comes forward. Councillor Haggerty, what is your foreshadowed motion?
I was going to move as per the book. But now I think I will move. Well, do I need to move that it be put to the end of the agenda? Is that procedural? Yes. Okay, I'll move that it be moved to the end of the meeting. Yep.
Yes, seconded?
Yeah, I second it.
Okay, any opposition? I'll put it. Those in favour, those against, the carried. I'll just give myself another little note. Oh, goodness gracious me. There it is. Another big hop. It's two. Okay. The next item is on page 131.
Question, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
If it's carried, why is it being considered at the end of the meeting?
Your motion has been lost and the motion that's the recommendation has not been dealt with as yet. So we have a chance to look at the recommendation and receive further information, which is what Councillor Did has asked for. Okay, on page 131 is the next motion. It's response to questions of notice for seniors consultation.
Happy to move that as per the book, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Seconder?
Yeah, I'll second that. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sheldon. Any opposition? I'll put it. Those in favour, those against, declare it carried. The next item is on page 136.
I'll leave that for the book, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Have we got a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second
Councillor
that.
Hadid.
Madam Mayor.
Councillor Did. Thank you, Councillor Caliander and Councillor Canib. Any opposition? I'll put it. Those in favour, those against, declare it carried. Next item's on page 145.
Madam Mayor, can I move that we move the committees as a whole?
Yes, certainly.
Happy to second it, Councillor Hadid.
Yep, thank you.
Madam Mayor, can I put in a motion for the budget review?
You want the budget review pulled out?
Yes, please.
No, that's fine. I'm happy to do that as just a request. So Councillor Caliander and Councillor Hadid moving as a whole with the exception of Committee 05.
As well as the traffic one, Madam Mayor.
Traffic, which is 03.
Yes.
All right. Okay, then I'll put it. Those in favour, those against, declare it carried. Committee 03 is on page 161. Oops, don't fall on the floor book. Councillor Hall, you had something you wish to say?
Yes, I've received some emails and some letters from the community, and they're asking me to thank the Liverpool Pedestrian Active Transport Committee for the work that has been done in Campbell Street with some signage for changing it from no parking to no standing. It's been a very sore issue for a number of years, and Council has fixed it, and they're congratulating Council for that work.
Well, thank you, Councillor. It's nice to get good feedback.
It is.
Thank you, Councillor.
As the chair of that committee, I would also like to say thank you.
No, okay. Okay. So, Councillor Harley, you happy to move that committee then?
I'll second it, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Rhodes. I'll put it those in favour, those against, declare it carried. The next item is the budget review, which is on page 174.
Yes, Madam Mayor. The motion, I'll just say the motion straight up, that a council applied, including the funding of the budget, for council to apply to the federal state governments 50 million grants to be allocated to community projects for the provision of concept plans for the visitation precinct that includes a permanent home for the Liverpool District Historical Society. You want 50 council, yeah, for 50 million for the $50 million grants to be allocated for community projects for the provision of concept plans for the visitation precinct that includes a permanent home for the Liverpool and District Historic Society.
Happy to second that.
Thank you. Is there any opposition?
I have a question, Madam Mayor.
Yes, certainly.
Are these specific grants that are available, or are these just grants that need to be sourced and then applied for?
Madam Mayor, at the time that we were talking about the visitation precinct, it was pointed out that there were no such grants, and then it was announced that the government would be providing 50 million in grants, but it has to be for community projects, so it fitted this one specifically. And it wasn't something that could be brought up because the federal and state government hadn't, at that time, announced that they would be providing the grants.
Can I also ask, through you, Madam Mayor, where the source of this funding is from?
I'll ask the acting CEO.
Oh, and for this precinct as well. So, is it the precinct? Yeah. Sorry, I'll just leave it there.
Yep.
Thank you, Councillor. If your question is what grants might be available at the federal and state level to support this project, I'll have to take that on notice. There's a wide array of grants around at the moment, and those that might be or those that this project might be eligible for, I couldn't tell you immediately, but happy to take that on notice. Other than that, we have not identified a funding source for this project yet, which I think was the result of a resolution from 2 council meetings ago. I know there's work happening now. Dr. Jackson is leading some work to develop a particular master plan for that visitation precinct on the Hume Highway. But if I can take the other question on notice, I will get back to councillors.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I should have phrased my question a little bit better. I was more referring to the actual costing of the visitation precinct, because $50 million is obviously a significant amount of money, and it's also a specific, quite a specific amount of money. So is that coming from a previous costing that came to council, or is this sort of, does it refer to the actual amount of funding that's available between state and federal governments? I'm a bit unclear about what the 50 million refers to, whether it's the amount of the grant or whether it's the cost of the precinct.
Through the Mayor, the 50 million is the amount of money that was announced by the federal government, I think it was, that they would be making available for community projects to councils. So it's not saying that we should apply for the whole 50 million, but we should take the opportunity to apply, considering this announcement from the federal government, you know, put it towards the work that we know that we've got to do for the provision of the concept plans for the visitation precinct.
Thank you. Councillor Haggerty, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm going to speak against the motion.
Yes.
On the basis that I don't think this is how we should be doing things. I'm a big supporter of finding a permanent home for the Historical Society. I'm a big supporter of anything that expands that area down where the Collingwood precinct, as it's known. I just don't think putting up motions for our pet projects on the floor of council is an appropriate way to do it. Council staff have a process where there's a long list of projects that are worthy. This is one of them, and I think they all need to be assessed based on need, social impact, and those kinds of things. So I guess the question here is, if we're going to go bid for $50 million for that precinct, there's an opportunity cost there. So that means 50 million doesn't perhaps go to Miller, or 50 million doesn't perhaps go to Wattle Grove, and that's all based on the fact that this is Councillor Rhodes is quite passionate about it, and I think good for her, but I don't think that's the way we should do it. I think there needs to be a process where these things are assessed based on need, and happy to ask for $50 million in grants. What I'm not happy to do is pick our pet projects. So if we could reword the motion, perhaps I could be wooed into supporting it if the wording was a bit more appropriate.
Okay, can I reword the motion that council considers to apply?
What if you reword it to say that council applies for federal funding if it's appropriate regarding the master planning of the visitation precinct? Because it may be inappropriate for various reasons, including the cost of development. There might be a limit on what councils or outside bodies can apply for, and it might be a situation where councils are expected to put $3 in and council receives $1 for their $3. So there's all sorts of variables that need to be considered.
And we need to make clear, thank you, Madam Mayor, I think that it's covered in the current motion that by putting in the word council considers, they will take that into consideration.
Yeah.
But 50 million grants is not applicable just to Liverpool.
It's to be shared.
To councils to share. I think that Councillor Haggerty seems to think we're going to go in there and ask for $50 million for this one particular project. That's not what the motion, that is not the intention of the motion at all.
Thank you, councillor. There's another hand up and I can't make out who it is. I'm terribly sorry. It's if you put your hand...
I'll just talk if you want me.
Oh, thank you, councillor.
Just a question in relation to when we had the COVID extraordinary meeting. If I remember correctly, we had a list of projects at the end of the report that were shovel ready that could apply for grants.
Yeah.
What was the visitation obviously the visitation precinct wouldn't be on that list. Maybe if the councillor would then reword and not limit it just to the visitation precinct, if there are grants out there that the visitation precinct is obviously not ready, so it's not limited to that, we apply for grants based on that report that was provided to council a couple of months ago.
It was June.
I think that I had that covered. It was for the provision of concept plans for the visitation precinct, not to build it. We're nowhere near that.
Well, maybe that the motion should read that council considers applying for federal and state government funding for appropriate shovel-ready.
No.
Now, hold on. Let me finish, councillor. Shovel-ready projects that have already been approved by council, and also, if appropriate, the concept plans for the visitation precinct.
Can I see what my original motion was, please? Because
while we're waiting,
hold
on, councillor. Just you've talked to your motion. Just shush a minute, councillor Hall, your turn.
Well, that's not what I want in the motion, Madam Mayor.
Wait a minute, we can come back to you, councillor. Just hold on. Councillor Hall has his hand up. Councillor Hall. Somewhere.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I didn't have my hand up.
Oh, you're showing up in my system. All right. Yeah, it's showing up.
My apologies.
Thank you. Now, what's your issue, councillor Rhodes?
Yeah, the issue is, Madam Mayor, that not all the shovel-ready projects will be applicable to the $50 million recently announced as funding for council community projects. So I think we're confusing it. You know, this just simply is an application for possible funding from the recently announced $50 million in grants to be allocated for community projects, you know, that all councils can apply for.
Yeah, I hear you. I think we're trying to say the same thing, but probably in different ways.
Well, no, I'm not talking about shovel-ready projects.
So you don't want to entertain any of those projects in your motion. You just want to concentrate on the concept plans for the visitation precinct.
Because because at the time when the motion was put forward, it was pointed out that there were no avenues for council to apply for grants for that project. And
well, Madam Mayor, just a question. I believe all what we do at council is a community project, isn't it?
No, they're not all community projects.
So all what we do at council is a community project.
What I think Councillor Did's trying to explain, Councillor Rhodes, is that the projects we get involved in are for the betterment of the community. So
why this one then? Why did council tell me that there were no applications that would suit this type of council activity?
I can't comment on that, councillor, but I can comment on what the motion is before us. Now, you either wish to modify that to your liking and I put it to the councillors, or we go with the motion that's in front of us.
The council considers applying to the federal and state government from the $50 million council community projects recently announced for possible funding for the concept plans for the visitation precinct if appropriate. How about that?
It's your motion, councillor. Councillor Harley, are you happy with that?
Yes, I'm happy with that.
Okay, thank you. Any other speakers for or against the motion?
Madam Mayor, you just might want to include the original recommendation that we adopt the minutes of the budget review panel and blah, 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 the material put forward by Councillor Rhodes and Councillor Hull.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a question, Mayor. Just a procedural question. This doesn't stop us for applying for grants for anything else. There's a standing resolution to council from our COVID meeting around that. This doesn't override that. We can apply for grants for whatever we want.
No, I can't stop you.
No,
Excellent.
it can't stop you.
Yeah, I was speaking to the Mayor. You're not the Mayor.
Councillor, I think it would depend on the conditions of the grants, to be frank. I can't say hand on heart I know what the conditions of this 50 million is. It might be, for instance, you're only allowed to put up one particular project. It may say, as I said earlier, you can put up shovel-ready ones if they're appropriate to the guidelines. It could be anything. So I don't have the guidelines in front of me, so I think it'd be very foolish to make a comment.
And Madam Mayor, can I point out that it's that council considers applying? All those things will come into consideration from council.
Well, the motion does say considers, councillor.
Yes, I know.
Anybody else that wishes to speak? You have your right to reply, Councillor Rhodes.
Madam Mayor, this motion is simply to make council aware that it wasn't aware of at the time when the visitation precinct was being discussed, where they told us that there was no funding or grants available for this project at that time. And all I am bringing to the attention of council is that there was an announcement of $50 million for community projects recently announced for possible funding of the concept plans if council considers that it would be appropriate. That's a pretty harmless motion.
Thank you, councillor. I'm going to put the vote for this particular motion. If we could have the voting sheet, please. Thank you. I'm going to vote against the motion. Thank you. Councillor Yard. I'll come back. Councillor Balut.
4.
4. Councillor Chitty. Councillor Did.
4.
Councillor Nat Haggerty.
4.
Councillor Hull. He voted for it, so he's 4. Councillor Calienda.
4.
Oops, it's moving. Councillor Carnib, Deputy Mayor.
Against.
Against.
Yeah.
Councillor Rhodes moved it, so she'd be 4. Councillor Shelton.
Yeah, 4. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And Councillor Ayard, are you back?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'm back. I'll vote for.
4. Okay. Councillor Chitty, are you back?
Yeah, 4, Mayor, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Declared the motion carried. Next item is on page, it's questions with notice, and it's on page 188.
188.
Councillor Haggerty.
Yeah, that one's mine. Yeah, I'm happy with the response. It just appears to be an oversight. I don't need to get out my adjustable spanner and put up a sign just yet, so I'm happy to leave it.
All right then, thank you. The next motion is on page 191. It's in the name of Councillor Hull, and the motion itself is on page 192.
Motion.
On page 192, sorry, the questions. I apologise, the questions.
That's fine. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Fine, thank you. The next item is...
Sorry, Madam Mayor. Sorry.
Yep.
But I meant your reply was fine. I have some questions and a possible notice of motion.
Okay then, go ahead.
First of all, the answers provided, I don't really address the issue. The problem here is that this relates to private certifiers, private certifying authorities, and in a particular instance, the EPA. What happens is when someone, a resident, complains about a compliance issue, If it's any one of those three, council doesn't do anything. And so what happens is the resident, unfortunately, doesn't get any answers. So what I'd like to propose, if possible, one, that council investigates implementing a development assessment compliance policy, assessment compliance policy dealing with compliance issues raised by residents, irrespective of whether it is a PC, PCA or EPA issue. And two, whether it is, sorry, that should be whether it is a PC, PCA or EPA issue, or EPA issue. That's fine. And two, a report to be brought to the August General Council meeting, addressing issues related to implementing such a policy, including budgetary implications. And I'm happy to speak to that.
Thank you, Councillor. We have a seconder for that motion.
I'll second it, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Rhodes. Yes, speak to your motion, Councillor Hahn.
Look, there's a lot of information in that actual question with notice, and I thank the council for supplying all that information. The problem is that this does not address the issue. Council really needs to do a little bit more than this. If we have residents that are complaining about a development that is having an effect on their health and safety, we shouldn't just say, oh, look, it's a private certifier issue or it's an EPA issue. You need to contact them. I think council has an obligation to look after the health and safety of our residents. And I know it's going to cost money, but I think council should be the ones that do the initial investigating by going to the private certifier or whatever authority, including the EPA, to allow the matter to be investigated. And this is exactly what has just happened in the rural area of Greendale. We have had an issue there which caused local residents to form an action group because council could not legally at this stage do anything about it. Now, overall, after lots and lots of complaints to councillors and the EPA, the matter was investigated, and there are some very, very serious problems that have occurred there. And council is now looking at the matter. What I'm suggesting is that we shouldn't let it get to that stage. If there are problems somewhere and it is a private certifier, I don't believe we should just say to the resident, it's not our problem. You go to find out who the private certifier is, and if that person doesn't want to do anything about it, then you go and see whoever the responsible body is, such as the Builders Association or whatever. And the same applies to the EPA. In this particular instance, the EPA was contacted and they said, oh, it's not our problem. It's actually the private certifier. So you get into this loop of catch-22 and nothing happens other than residents get very, very frustrated and they tend to blame council first before anybody else. So I'm suggesting that council has a good look at this and maybe we need to bite the bullet and that we do the investigating initially and if necessary take some legal action simply because the relevant authority doesn't want to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I just want to ask the Acting CEO, I have no problem with the sentiment of the motion, but I'm just conscious that Councillor Hall is talking about us taking legal action. Do we have I'm asking the Dorothy Dixer, do we have the ability to take legal action in those circumstances, just so we're all clear?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, we do, and I appreciate where Councillor Hull's coming from on this. There is a fine line between council and its duty of care to the community, but also the change that was made many years ago now, back in '98, I think, to shift a lot of the resources out of council into the private sector to deal with these sorts of matters with private certifying authorities, who are public officials under the law. So it is in fact their job, if they're alerted to a potential non-compliance, to investigate it and then take action themselves. But to your question, Madam Mayor, there is nothing that prevents council from exercising its powers to also take action. There will be some kind of resource impact, but with the motion before you, Council, I think we can set all of that out and perhaps find some sort of policy position that balances duty of care with resources.
Thank you so much for that. Okay, councillors, does anybody wish to speak about... Councillor Chitty, you had your hand up.
Thanks, Mayor. Two questions, if I can, through to the acting CEO. There were recent changes made in New South Wales Parliament in relation to private certifiers. Are we up to speed with those, and does that affect, how things used to happen and how they will happen?
Yeah, we are up to speed with them. There's a short summary there in the response to the question without notice about the very, very simple summary of the impact of those changes. The governing body will be abolished. Certifiers will be regulated more closely, and they will have tougher measures about their conduct, in simple terms. So yeah, we are across them. If you would like some more detail on exactly what those changes mean, Councillor, happy to provide that if I can take it on notice.
Yeah, no dramas, thanks, Mayor. And just one further one. If I recall correctly, I think it was early this year in a meeting, I think it was moved by Councillor Haggerty and possibly seconded by myself, that we got a report back for Council to be able to do or to investigate if Council compliance team can go in there and check up on these things. Did that ever come back?
I'll have to take that on notice as well. I do recall it. I don't think we have got back to you on that. That was more to do with, rather than at the sort of point where a resident might raise a complaint about compliance, it was more during the construction phase, yes, monitoring the work of certifiers. Can I take that on notice, Councillor? And
no dramas, thanks.
Councillor Balut, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to speak in support of that motion. In previous time, I have spoken in support of private certifiers. Indeed, however, recently, in recent times, the last probably year and a half, we did have various issues all over the media with private certifiers / property developers. So, yes, we do have a duty of care for our constituents, and definitely I think Council should get involved at times where there is a concern, definitely. Now, yes, the impact, I have heard that people have been impacted dramatically with certain DAs, and where they found themselves alone with no help. So definitely it's a good motion, and definitely we should explore all the options where Council does get involved and take an action if able, if not, refer it to the relevant authority. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Do we have any opposition to this motion? Okay, well, I'll put it. Those in favour, those against, declare it carried. Thank you. The next item is presentation by councillors. Do we have any presentations? Any virtual presentations? No. Okay. Notices of motion. First one's on page 194.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I move the recommendations as put in the book. The important thing is just for this to be addressed by Council, and I think that the best people of letting us know what what is the best way of doing this is actually the council staff. So, yeah, I put the recommendations be adopted as the motion.
Are you talking about the notice of motion? It's on page 194. That is the motion you wish to stand?
Mayor?
Sorry?
On page 195.
5.
It is recommended that the following definitions be adopted by council to clarify any times or time periods in council resolutions relating to the COVID-19 pandemic.
So your motion is now the items page 195.
Yeah, which starts, it is recommended and ends with point 3.
Okay, so point 1, point 2, point 3, yes?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Balut. Is there any opposition? No? All right, I'll put it. Those in favour, those against, declare it carried. The next item is on page 196.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll obviously move that way. That's my nom. Yeah, look, it's pretty straightforward in the background there. There's a lot of talk about what workplaces and what work looks like post-COVID, and it's appropriate that we just decided what post-COVID looks like. But there's a really good opportunity here for Liverpool. There's been talk about getting the state and federal governments to have these hubs out, in sort of satellite hubs out in the suburbs where workers can come to work there from a public, for a public sector agency, and that has obviously a number of benefits. They're closer to home. It reduces traffic congestion. It reduces overcrowding on public transport, which we know is a very prominent way that the virus can be spread. It also means that people can leave home later and get home earlier, so they get to spend more time with their family, which has a multitude of health benefits, and obviously builds happier homes and happier families. And of course, if we have one of these in Liverpool, it'll stimulate the local economy. We have had local jobs cut in Liverpool over the last decade or so. We had Business Link, we had the Guardian and Trustee, they've been closed. So this is a really good opportunity to get good public sector jobs back into the CBD. And if they're working in Liverpool, they're spending in Liverpool. They're going to our local restaurants. They're going to our local cafes. And if the state government wants to trial somewhere to see whether this works or not, there's probably no better place in Sydney than Liverpool. You've got a lot of public sector agencies based in Sydney. Those that aren't, for the most part, are based in Parramatta, and I know they're moving a lot of public sector jobs out to the Parramatta Square development. Liverpool wants to be the third CBD, so this is a great way to, I guess, solidify that. And we've obviously got a lot of commercial about to come out of the ground. This is a good catalyst to get that out of the ground by securing a big public sector tenant. So hopefully we're all for stimulating jobs in Liverpool, and hopefully everyone is on board.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for this motion?
Yes. I'll second Councillor Hadid.
Thank you, Councillor Did. I appreciate that.
I've got a question, Madam Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Rhodes.
Just clarification. Does council have any idea of what public sectors would be interested in allocating outside of the Sydney CBD or anywhere else into Liverpool? Because I would have thought that Julie would have been right on top of this to try and encourage the public sector to move into Liverpool, as was Service New South Wales.
I'll ask the Acting CEO if there's any further information.
Thank you, Mayor. Certainly that is a very strong focus of Julie and the City Economy team to try and attract the public sector, more of the public sector to relocate to Liverpool. There are a lot of meetings had to try and encourage that outcome. It has there's a number of public sector institutions here, of course, but we would love to have many more. It has been hard to get them to relocate here, I guess, in part because of the public transport conditions, but certainly it remains a top priority for us to keep working on that to attract those sorts of public sector employers into Liverpool, and we'll keep doing that.
Thank you, Tim. In view of that, Madam Mayor, and I wonder if Councillor Haggerty would consider a slight alteration, that the first thing we need is a report from Julie's department. I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of her department.
City Economy,
on what she has done so far, and a report back to council so that we know what obstacles she's found, right, in doing this. A little bit more information to be provided by all the work that has been done by by that department back to council before we actually start lobbying the state and federal government. I agree with the sentiments of it all, totally, but I do think we do need to have a report back on what has been done so far.
Well, Madam Mayor, if I can say, as a seconder of the motion, number 3 report back on progress in 6 months. This is what would include all the work already has been done by Julie and her team.
That's true. It would be included in the report back.
That's correct.
Point 3. Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Chitty, you have your hand up.
Just a quick question through the acting CEO. Is hot desking dead?
Who knows, Councillor?
And I ask genuinely, given all these things and the way businesses are very supportive of bringing jobs into the area, and I'd love to see floors and floors. And as we know, Civic Place, for example, has lots of floors in it to bring government departments here so they can spend here and do all that. If all the talk is that hot desking is dead, should we apply our resources to something else instead of chasing something that may, people have already buried it?
Councillor, I mean, I wouldn't go as far as saying hot desking is dead, because there's a variety of ways you can manage, the shared use of office space, and I think that's probably what those offices that have, made a commitment to a much more open plan, sharing, activity-based approach to the office are grappling with at the moment. But this is also about workplace hubs where there is a sharing of the space, I suppose, but there's the potential to add, other layers, management layers to clean spaces and make that work. So I think there'd be a way to mitigate those risks, but it is a very timely question.
Councillor Haggerty, would you consider lobbying the state and federal governments for the public sector for hubs to be located in the Liverpool CBD and just take hot desking out?
Yeah, we can take the word hot desking out.
Red hot desking out, just so that the
warm desking,
freezing desking. Anyway, just all right. Okay, if we take hot desking out of it, and then we just the motion stands that we are looking at working hubs, and that way just we see what happens. Thank you. As the seconder, happy with that, Councillor Hadid?
Really happy, thanks.
Thank you. Is there any opposition? I'll put it. Those in favour, those against, carried. Thank you. The next item is on page 198.
Yes, Madam Mayor, that is a notice of motion under my name. The background is quite detailed, and in terms of the actual motion going forward, obviously since our briefing around the Wesrock Power agreement last year, prices on renewables have further decreased. So, as an economic, economic benefit to us long term, to really consider this and how we can, reduce the strain on ratepayers in terms of considering this option.
Thank you, Councillor.
Yeah, and I will leave my comments there because the background is quite extensive.
Okay, well, you're formally moving it. Have we got a seconder?
Madam, if in addition to...
I'll second it.
Thank you, Councillor Haggerty. Councillor Rhodes, you have a comment?
I was about to say, Madam Mayor, if an addition to the motion could be considered, I would be happy to second the motion.
Well, what is your
well, the background did mention the renewable solar power purchase agreement that West Rock had proposed, and I thank the councillor for drawing attention to that, because it is also very much in the theme of this particular motion. So the addition would be that council provide a briefing meeting before September council meeting, inviting West Rock to present to councillors and the financial management team of council information relating to the opportunity for council to participate in a power purchase agreement through West Rock Limited, through a 10-year power purchase agreement on offer for renewable energy developer GenX Power, ABN 18 152 098 854. So that is what I would like to have included in. I'll go back now for the typist. Providing a briefing meeting before September council meeting, inviting West Rock to present to councillors and the financial management team of council information relating to the opportunity for council to participate in a power purchase agreement through West Rock Limited, through a 10-year power purchase agreement on offer from renewable energy developer GenX Power, and you don't need the ABN number at this stage.
I'm happy to include that as a 0.5 in the motion.
So you're happy to adopt that as 0.5, Councillor Calienda?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Is there any opposition to this motion?
Not opposition, but I do have a question.
Yes.
Haven't we already had multiple briefings on that? Like we can have lots of briefings on the same thing, but have we not had a briefing on that one?
I can answer that, Madam Mayor. The reason why we need a new one. The reason why we need a new briefing meeting on it, Councillor, is because the investment opportunity depends when you invest into it. I think when it was first presented to council, the investment opportunity was based on the electricity in 10 years' time being above something like 41 kilowatts per hour. The current opportunity is at 51 kilowatts per hour. So it's important for us to have the most recent and current opportunity to council, right? It changes over time. On the 10 years time, as was presented for, the opportunity for council would now be a 10% or greater yield. Previously, it was something like 23% or something like that. So what is on offer today is not the same as was presented to council back at the time when it was presented to councillors. And also there was the misinterpretation that this was would interfere with our current suppliers of energy. I've got to point out that this has nothing to do with who currently supplies council's energy, and this would never change anything upon those agreements that council has currently got. What this is a financial opportunity, it's an investment opportunity. And when you consider COVID and the cost to council there, it's pertinent that we actually get, it will really bring to the front any opportunities of council to increase their revenue, and this is one of them. But at the last presentation, I think we had.
I get the gist of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I think it's a very in-depth answer to your question. Okay, is there any opposition to this motion? I'll put it, those in favour, those against, declare it carried. The next item's on page 201.
Madam Mayor, can I just note that it was carried unanimously?
Yes, have that noted. Page 201 is in your name, I think, Councillor Calienda.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Again, the background is suitably detailed, but I think with the Western Sydney Airport and Aerotropolis a really key part of our future strategy, something like this, and advocating on behalf of our region to federal government is particularly significant. So I'll
reserve your right of reply.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any speakers against?
No, I just got some questions.
Yes, Councillor.
Directed to Councillor Calienda. What do you expect the federal government to do? Say in, trying to keep alive competition in the airlines. Are you expecting them to support financially to keep them alive? Is that at the back of your mind as a possible opportunity for the federal government?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Look, that's one potential strategy that's been put on the table. I think it's really important that the federal government doesn't allow another Ansett type situation, because we know from that example that we really need at least two players in domestic aviation for it to be competitive and for the aviation industry to thrive. So I know that in the last few months the federal government has provided financial support to Qantas, and if it means that in order to kind of ensure that there is competition, it provides financial support to Virgin, then that's something that's available to them.
And do you know whether the other domestic airlines like Jetstar, Tiger and Rex are still operating? Do you have an update on their viability to be able to continue to offer domestic airline services?
Well, given Rex and Jetstar are owned by Qantas, they're still operating. Tiger, I understand, is still operating, but they're owned by a Singaporean corporation. So,
yeah, well, that's the difficulty that I have if we were asking the federal government to support these companies, because we're supporting 41% of overseas investors in Qantas, I believe, and I think Virgin's almost totally owned by foreign investors, and I don't think it would be, a good thing for Australian citizens to be supporting foreign investment. So that just caused a little bit of confusion as to where you were going by writing to the federal members.
If I could just sort of respond to that, Madam Mayor, in terms of the benefit or the payout of the federal government actually kind of ensuring competition within the domestic aviation market, I think the payout for Australian citizens outweighs any issues in terms of foreign investment and that sort of thing, because we know, particularly for our region, it's going to be very significant in terms of jobs, in terms of other types of investment, in terms of the development of future industries. Very much of our future strategy is heavily dependent on the Western Sydney Airport and Aerotropolis region, and if we are to have a strong a strong outcome for the Western Sydney Airport, we need to have a strong aviation industry.
And are you aware that the Western Sydney Airport is currently very engaged with talking to with all possible owners of the Virgin Airways and Qantas, of course, but Virgin to secure them as a service from the Western Sydney Airport. Are you aware that that is currently happening?
Yes, I believe it was reported in the media.
So this is like a federal government initiative. I'm just a little bit confused as to you're asking the federal government acknowledges that domestic aviation is is it the responsibility of federal government, domestic aviation? I thought that safety issues and that were, but I'm not sure that domestic aviation services, like the airlines themselves, is the responsibility of federal government.
Regulation of domestic aviation is the responsibility of federal government.
Which is in that it is in safety issues?
Safety issues, but also in other respects.
In other respects.
Okay, councillors, I think I've allowed a fairly free discussion on this. Is there any opposition? We've got Councillor Caliander moving.
Yeah, I'll speak against me.
Wait a minute. Want to get a seconder.
I'll second.
Councillor, thank you. Councillor Hachidi.
Whilst I'm very supportive of jobs, aviation, cheap airfares, everything else, Western Sydney Airport, the whole lot, very supportive, but I just can't support this. In the final paragraph on page 200, it talks about Etihad or Singapore Airlines servicing our domestic routes and the money will go overseas. Virgin, my understanding, for example, is overseas owned or majority overseas owned, and the money is going overseas. If I'm incorrect, I stand to be corrected. The federal government can't save everything, can't save the world, as much as we would love it to. We're seeing now they're trying to save the world, and we're going to be paying for it for the next 100 years, I reckon. I think sometimes you've just got to let business be business and competition be competition, and people stand up on their own 2 feet. Do I support the jobs that come with it? Yes. Should we just be calling on federal government and blaming federal government for everything that goes under? No. Money is going to go overseas, whether it's Virgin, Singapore, Etihad, and we just calling on government again to do something which I believe the private sector should be doing.
Through you, Madam Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Blood.
Yes, I would like again to speak and maybe ask some questions, speak against that. Yes, Councillor Hachidi said a lot of things I wanted to say as is reading in my mind. Virgin Airline is owned by shareholders, and again, report in the media who owns it. Predominantly overseas companies. We got to be mindful that the federal government did support, and I'm all for jobs, by the way, 110%, did support Virgin with tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions, I believe. There's been a lot of talk about people trying to buy Virgin to keep approximately 10 to 15,000 jobs in Australia, which is great if that's achieved, but that's the private sector. Now, I find it when Virgin at, as per report and media, nearing $7.1 billion in deficit. Virgin had been losing money from day one, I believe. Now, for the federal government, taxpayers, ratepayers, to go in and spend billions of dollars, if that works, to revive Virgin, I find that untenable. We've done that with the car industry. We know what has happened. And there was hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars spent there. Yes, as Councillor Hachidi said, ideally would love to save the world, but not that one. Ansett did disappear, iconic household name. Virgin came on board and took over for a number of years. Now, having said that, I do support jobs, but I don't really like ratepayers' money in the hundreds of millions, if not billions, to go overseas to some, I would consider, very wealthy airlines or countries. Now, we're not here to subsidise them. We're here to retain and sustain jobs, but jobs that will stay in Australia and supported by Australian government. That's all for me, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. We had 2 against and we've had the mover for. Is there another for?
I am for.
Would you like to speak, Mr. For?
Mr. Ford would like to speak. Yeah, I'd just like to address a couple of points that have been raised. There's nothing in this motion that says anything about, foreign investment or shareholders or anything like that. So all this is merely saying is that we acknowledge that it's important that Australia has a competitive domestic airline market, and you can't have a competitive domestic airline market with a monopoly. So that's one point. And yes, while there are a significant amount of foreign shareholders that currently own Virgin, the difference between your Virgins and your Etihads and your Singapores is that Virgin is based in Australia. So plenty of those jobs are based here, whether that's, catering, whether that's mechanical work, whether that's, even the admin jobs and when you call through to book a ticket or what have you, that's all based in Australia. Now, if we were to let someone like Etihad or Singapore, I guess, take that market, then we would effectively be consigning those jobs to Singapore or wherever Etihad is based. So I guess what we're talking about here is the lesser of two evils. I certainly would love a majority-owned or even a completely Australian-owned airline to come in, but at the end of the day, that's currently not an option on the table. The option on the table is you have a monopoly domestic airline market controlled by Qantas, or you have a competitive airline market where you have Qantas and you have Virgin, and Virgin has some jobs based in Australia. The other option, Councillor Hachidi and Councillor Balut have, spoken against, I guess, this motion. I guess the other option, are they supporting, if they want to nationalise the airline industry, I'm happy to, if they want to back that one in, I'll back them in on that one too, if they want to nationalise Virgin. So perhaps they can put up a motion calling for the nationalisation of Virgin. You'd have my vote on that one. And the other thing as well, if we're talking about, the government can only support certain things, I certainly agree. I note that the government injected $50 million into regional media back in April. A considerable amount of that money went to News Limited, which is, for the most part, owned by an American billionaire named Rupert Murdoch. Now, why is it okay for Rupert to get a significant chunk of $50 million to support regional media, which he then goes and closes down a month later, but we're not willing to support Australian jobs in the airline industry? So I think it's a little bit hypocritical. What we're arguing here against, as I said earlier, is what's on the table here is a monopoly controlled by Qantas or a competitive airline market with a significant amount of jobs based in Australia. They're the two options. There isn't a third option. And it seems that Councillor Balut and Hachidi are arguing about a third option, which actually isn't on the table. That's me.
Thank you. No, Councillor Balut, you've already spoken. Thank you. We'll have the mover's right of reply. We've had 2 for and 2 against. We'll have the right of reply. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I know we sort of got derailed into a discussion about funding arrangements and bailout packages and that sort of thing. Like I said in my response to Councillor Rhodes, that is a matter for the federal government. If they decide that they want to, bail out Virgin, that's up to them. What this motion simply asks council to do, which requires no ratepayers' money, is to write to the federal government, write to our members of parliament to advocate for our area as an area that sees aviation as a significant industry in our future, to talk about the dangers of the domestic airline industry becoming a monopoly. I think that most councillors would agree with me that a monopoly on anything is probably a dangerous thing to have, whether it's in the retail and supermarket sector, whether it's in aviation, or whether it's in a different industry entirely. So, like I said, what I'm simply asking my fellow councillors to do is advocate for our region, advocate for jobs in our region, to the federal government to advocate against a monopoly. And I'll leave my comments there.
Thank you very much. You've had your right reply. I'll need the sheet for the vote, please, if you could put it up. Okay, I'll vote for. Councillor Ayoade?
Against, Madam Mayor.
Against. Councillor Balut?
Against, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Hichidi?
Against.
Councillor Hadid?
Against.
Councillor Haggerty?
For.
Councillor Hall?
Against.
Councillor Calienda?
For.
Councillor Carnib?
For.
Councillor Rhodes?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's going to have to be against. I agree with the general direction.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Shelton?
For, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. The motion is defeated. We will now take a 15-minute break and we will reconvene at, if you can add up, 7:50. The results of confidential items are that the Youth Council membership was endorsed. Also, the new term of youth councillors to be 3 years. Also, that the building and amenities cleaning service contract, sorry, I'm just going to find it. I had it here a minute ago. There it is. No, that's not it. Oh, I haven't got it with me. Whatever was the recommendation of council was endorsed. We need to put the words in there, but that was endorsed. And then on Conf O, we had Grow 01, and that was the recommendation on page 67, which is on page 67, it endorses the planning agreement for monetary contribution of $85,000 towards upgrade of Bonera Road and Yarunga and Uto Road intersection. Directs the CEO to publicly exhibit the planning agreement and accompanying explanation note for 28 days. Delegate authority to the CEO to subject to consideration for any changes following public exhibition to execute the planning agreement in the form that is publicly exhibited or in minor alterations. Note that if changes other than minor changes are made arise from the public exhibition process, this will be reported back to council. And note that any planning agreement will be subject to approval of modification application DA 527/2017/A, which proposes deletion of conditions 107, 108 and 109 relating to design and construction of the portion of Bonera Road, Yarunga Street and Yoto's intersection upgrade, and the addition of a condition requiring execution of the planning agreement and payment of the money contribution prior to the release of any occupation certificate for the site. The next item on the agenda was COM 01, and that was on page 123 of the booklet. And the recommendation, which I won't read out because it is extremely lengthy, was endorsed. The recommendation on page, 123, I think it is on 123, actually. Oh, come on, you.
On the screen, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. The recommendation is per page 123 has been endorsed, leaving the last item, which is the appointment of acting chief executive officer, and that person will be Dr. Eddie Jackson, and that the shortened version of the motion, which is quite lengthy and can be found as part of our minutes, that the council will now be recruiting a permanent CEO. And that being all the business of council, the meeting closed at 8:48 p.m. Thank you all very much.